Welcome to the Narrowgate Podcast. I'm Weston.
And I'm Logan.
And this is the McKenzie Meredith episode.
Oh, so good.
He is one smart dude.
Yeah, I love this guy.
Yeah. I mean, so many different topics that we talked about. We kind of navigated through a lot of different things and then ended with just the wealth of information that McKenzie has in these different kind of innocuous Bible stories that he somehow makes so interesting.
Look, if we want to talk about a life like transformed during a student's experience at Narrowgate, man, this is McKenzie Meredith, and love this guy. Great conversation today. The only sad thing is we couldn't do it in person, so he's on Zoom. Can we say Zoom? We're doing Zoom.
It's actually Google Meet.
And so, yeah, as always, if you want to check out more about Narrowgate Foundation, check out our show notes, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Well, McKenzie, we start off all of our podcasts by asking two questions. And these two questions are going to be familiar to you. So you just answer however you see fit, all right? McKenzie, who are you and why are you here?
Well, my name is McKenzie Meredith. I'm a 33-year-old guy, about to be 34. I live in Amarillo, Texas, but I've bounced around all over. And I showed up at Narrowgate in July of 2013. Because I was suicidal. I was trying to kill myself, wanted to kill myself. I was miserable. Didn't have any real issues in my life, to be honest. Like, there was nothing that justified that externally. Like, I was doing fine. I had no substance abuse issues. I was raised in a loving home. Had friends and family who cared about me. I had a good job. Like, life was good from the outside. But I was not good. And I was miserable. Like, every day, just wanted to die every day. And it eventually got bad enough that I was just had to do something. I was down for a jack move. So I found out about Narrowgate through some people and called y'all up and talked to Boots. And he said, well, hey, the guys are going to be in Amarillo in 2 days. Do you think you can make it? I was 300 miles away in Dallas where I was living. I was like, sure, why not? So I didn't even read the brochure, to be clear. Like, somebody gave me this guy's phone number. I didn't know what this place was. Wow. I was like, it's a place you go. I don't know. It's in the woods, maybe. I had no idea what I was getting into. So I showed up in Amarillo and met everybody at a church. I really, at this point, had pretty much decided, like, I'm not going to do this. I don't know what this thing is. There's no way. And then I sat down and Bill started talking, and I don't even remember what he said. Mostly because I was crying too hard. Like, if he had known me my whole life and he got up there to speak directly to me, that's what he would have said. The whole thing he talked about.
Wow. And
from what I remember, he went pretty far off book from what he had planned and was just kind of following the spirit. And it was directed to me. It was exactly for me. And I just sat there with a bunch of strangers and cried, which is not a thing I did in front of people. And then I was like, all right, I guess I'll go. So yeah, I showed up to Narrowgate and went through the whole program, stuck around for a couple of years. I worked at the artisan shop when that was getting started, helped get the box beam company up and going, did some blacksmithing, ran the CNC, was a kind of part-time on staff at the lodge for a while. And in 2016 or so, I felt God calling me to leave, which I was pretty angry about, to be honest. But what you going to do? So I moved back to Amarillo, Texas, which is my hometown. And I have no idea why. Like, I had no clue what I was doing. I just knew I was supposed to go there. So I came back and got a job building cabinets and doing millwork and carpentry and stuff. And then out of the blue, like, I had nowhere to live. So I was crashing in one of my aunt's spare bedrooms. And she said, hey, we're having a small group here tonight. You should stick around. There's this girl I want you to meet. Of course, I was like, nobody wants to be match made by their aunt.
Thank you for saying the obvious thing out loud. But yeah, that's good.
No, but and of course, no, I'm married to the girl, so she's insufferable about it. But yeah, so got married, settled down, had some kids, started looking for a career that had things like health insurance, and did some praying. And then out of the blue, somebody said, hey, have you ever thought about the fire department? Like, no. And I'm in the fire department because that's how my life always goes. Because whenever my knee-jerk reaction is no, it's probably where God's putting me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I my honest take is because I knew you during your student experience here at Narrowgate, and I can't remember who it was or when it was, but I heard you were a fireman, and my first response was like a little shocked, and then the second thought was like, man, I'm proud of that guy. I don't even know if I'm allowed to be proud of him, but all of a sudden here I am, like, dude, God
Fill in the
can
blank.
do anything he wants
That's
with
right.
a life submitted to him. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, when I showed up on campus, like I was pretty broken. I could barely hold a conversation. Like I wouldn't look people in the eye. Hold on one second, Mike. Night. I love you.
Yes.
Sorry, it's bedtime.
No, I love that. Come on.
I could barely hold a conversation. I was so broken. Like my life at that point was I would go to my job and leave my job and go home and not leave the apartment at all. I lived exclusively on Taco Bell and Pizza Hut because I couldn't function enough to cook food. I was so depressed. And yeah, it's like I walked in day one and Stacy came up and gave me a great big hug during orientation and told me she loved me. And I was freaked out. She doesn't know me. There's no way she loves me. Like you can't love somebody you don't know. Or so I thought at the time. And yeah, Narrowgate was kind of just 8 months of me figuring out that actually, yeah, you can. And actually, yeah, they do.
Do you remember when that clicked for you? I mean, by shot in the dark, I mean, do you remember when you kind of realized, maybe people who don't know me can love me with a love that is not of their own origin? I mean, to even say it like that.
I was in the process of learning it the whole way through, but probably a couple months in is when it really started to click. And when I really started to go like, oh, these people care about me. Like,
yeah,
they're not just putting up with me. Cause that's a big part of at least my depression. I can't speak to everyone's is I hated myself. I couldn't imagine that anybody cared about me. Like the biggest feeling I remember when I was considering suicide is that I thought it would be a relief to everybody who knew me. I just thought everybody would be relieved to not have to deal with me anymore because I hated myself. And it was this process of learning that, yes, people can love you. And yes, you are who you are on purpose. And no, you're not this unrelenting burden. Like you have value. God didn't make you by accident. And really grappling with that identity. And to be honest, I think that's the thing I love about Narrowgate is it's different for everybody, you know? Like I grew up in the church. I was homeschooled. Like the Bible was part of our curriculum. I've read it through a bunch of times. Like I've been in church more than I've been most places in my life. I've spent a ton of time in it. So there wasn't a ton of book knowledge that I really walked away from Narrowgate that was new. But the transformative thing for me was community. It was living with people.
Yeah.
It wasn't a really small class. It was me and one other guy on the hill, a person I never met before. And this is going to sound harsh at first, but let me finish. This is a person that when I arrived, I would never have imagined spending time with. We couldn't be more different. Just in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, night one on the hill, sitting around the campfire with this guy talking to me. I was like, I have got to get out of this place. Like, I can't spend the next 8 months of my life with this guy. I'll go crazy.
Are you going to tell us who it was?
Yeah, absolutely. His name is Colton Couch. He's an Narrowgate grad. He's from Abilene. And yeah, my immediate reaction was just shock and horror and revulsion. Like, this guy.
And horror. He said.
Different in every way. Like I'm, at least at that point in my life, I was bookish. I was the most boring person you've ever met. Straight arrow. Like my idea of a perfect night was I wanted to listen to some jazz and read a book and not see another human being. Like I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I didn't do anything. This guy, like his life before coming to Narrowgate, he, all of those things, right? That's all he would talk about at first. And it was crazy. But then what I learned was he was, I think, objectively a better person than I was. Like I thought I had all the answers because I was very legalistic and I knew all the stuff. But Colton loves people immediately and without hesitation better than I've ever been able to. Like just completely. Open arms, accepts you as you are right in the moment, and he just loves people. Every person he's ever met, he's like that with. Like I never heard him say a bad thing about a person. He would just take anything and keep on going, just keep on loving people. And it took a while to realize that like, oh, that's what I need. I can have all the knowledge in the world, but if I don't love anybody, it just makes you miserable. like in a vacuum, it's just the worst. So that was really the big thing for me is like, I went from never being around human beings to spending a month with him on the hill, living under a tarp, and then, 6 months living in a barn with a bunch of other guys. And I was not prepared for that. But it was really what was the transformative thing for me, is just getting to be around and learn to love other people and learn to believe that they could love me as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I not to state the obvious, but as a fireman, you are, to my limited understanding of how it works, but you guys are forced to live hours, days, chunks of your life at a time in community with each other. What's that like for you now?
It's a very transferable skill set, let's say. Really appealed to me about it is, I mean, I'm sure this is something every grad deals with. Like, you leave Narrowgate, especially if you leave that community in that area, you go from having this wonderful pre-built community of people you're close with and you love and you have strong connection with, back to some other place where you don't have that. And that's not a thing you can find by and large out in the world. Like, you can have a church or a small group and you can be close with people, but that day in, day out living life alongside other people, it's hard to find that kind of community. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that appealed to me about the fire department is that I missed that. I missed that camaraderie and that sense of like being around other people who you love and care about and kind of living your lives together. And it's honestly, it's a lot like Narrowgate. So, I mean, that's kind of, I guess, who I am and sort of why I'm here is I just went through Narrowgate and it changed me as a human being.
Yeah, man. That's the good stuff.
Memories I have from back then, like, people will talk to me and tell me about memories they have of me from before Narrowgate. It feels like somebody's describing a different person. Like,
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the weird effects of depression, really severe depression, is that you can have actual memory loss. And I have some of that. Like, there are still to this day events that people tell me about. I was like, I have no memory of that. Like, that's nowhere in my mind.
Well, I have a memory of you.
Oh yeah? What's that?
Yeah. So, hopefully you remember, but whenever you came to work at Narrowgate Artisans for a little while and you started in the blacksmith shop, we spent like a couple of days together in the metal shop because I was working there doing blacksmithing and you were coming to like learn a little bit of everything. And so we were like, we were doing a little forging, we were doing a little welding. And then you may or may not remember this, but the welder broke. So the gas valve was no longer, operating. So it wasn't letting gas out into the line. And so we couldn't, we were trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And so we unscrewed the valve on the back of it. And then the spring inside of it was broken. And so I had a ballpoint pen, took the spring out of the ballpoint pen, and then we put it in there and screwed it all back together. And then it freaking worked, So we fixed this welder with the spring from a ballpoint pen. And it was awesome.
And it's probably still the spring that's in there. Like, at least the duration of my time at NGA, it was still that same spring.
No doubt.
And again, I want to give you a chance to talk about this too, but my memory is like, because again, you were around that season that the shops on campus were really kind of getting up and running, which is now, such a consistent part of the student experience. And my memory of you is like, man, McKenzie really like came alive in working with these, with these skills, developing these skills, helping them get off the ground as far as like the student experience. And again, I just, one of my favorite things, and Colin will chuckle at this too. One of my favorite projects I think I ever was a part of was, it wasn't Crown of Thorns. It was somebody help me out here. What was the video that you did? And
we were casting brass crosses.
Yes, it was the crosses. Okay. There was something about the way that you shot that, Colin, and your very articulate expression of the gospel in that and through that, and just like getting to put music on it. It was one of my favorite things that we ever got to make. Colin is looking at me with,
bro, I cannot remember what you're talking about.
You don't know?
I don't know what cross video?
Yeah, and you like artistically shot it.
Well, I know that. Like everything I shoot is artistic, obviously.
Yeah, right. And they're all still on YouTube, probably. But like, as far as the voiceovers of like students giving their testimony over like a crafting video, and McKenzie just like knocks it out of the park, and you're like, this is the most articulate.
From a VO point, yes.
Yes.
McKenzie would take the cake over any of us.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Colin's like, you're saying all the right things.
Yeah,
Like,
I just
everything
don't remember what
making
you're talking
sense. I just don't remember it.
There was a class from ACU who came through. One of the nights we cast brass crosses
Yeah.
with little like verses in them.
I'm just saying, it's a great video. Go find it online if you're listening, because it's great. Colin's looking for it right now.
I was not a crafty person prior to Narrowgate. I'd never really built anything of my own volition. I grew up with my father working on stuff a lot because we were poor. And so when things broke, we fixed them. And when the house needed work, we did the work. So I'd experienced some of that as a child, but as an adult, I had no desire to build or create anything. I liked books and I like to write is about the most creative I ever got, but that was it. And I just never even considered any of it, but you have a lot of free time in Narrowgate, or not free time, but there's a lot of empty time sometimes, I'm in the woods. I don't have a phone. Like there's not, what do I do? And there were these shops. So I kind of just went in and started tinkering around, and Josh Myers came by one day and was working in the shop, and I was just sitting there watching him, and it just started to click, and I could see the concepts working together, and I could see like mechanically what was happening. And I was like, oh, I get this. Like I get what's happening here. It was the same thing in the wood shop. Like I remember there was a day where we were in the wood shop and Bill made what sounded like an insane statement when he pointed at the shop and he said, you see every tool in here? It's a chisel. I was like, that's stupid. What are you talking about? That's a saw. I don't know a lot. That's a saw. And he's like, nah, a saw is just a bunch of chisels going in a circle. And I was like, oh, that makes me so angry that he's right. Oh, that's the worst. But it kind of just started to crack that open because I have an analytical mind. And I started thinking about, I was like, oh, I get it. Like I get mechanically and like functionally how these things work. Like that felt amazing. Like I'd never really activated that part of my brain before or thought about stuff in that way. And I loved it. And so I just kind of started tinkering. I was in the wood shop or the metal shop like all the time and just really loved it. And it kind of bled into the artisan shop. And then I flew to Cleveland and took a class and learned how to run the CNC. Started trying to get that thing up and running. And I didn't really connect the dots at first. I was like, I'm here for this, religious thing. And then separate issue, I'm building things. And they were, two discrete things in my mind. Until one day they just weren't. And I realized they were two halves of the same whole. Like that. This search for my identity had a lot to do with this desire to make and build things. And I had these realizations about God that I don't remember the specific name for it. There's a principle in like the study of the Bible, right? That the first time something appears, it's kind of important, right? It sets a precedent for how that's going to be handled.
Principle of first mention, or I think there's another name for it, but yeah, that one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Or the law of first mention.
Yeah, law of first mention. Yep.
Yeah. And the first time biblically anyone's ever filled with the Spirit is in Exodus 31. There's two guys, Bezalel and Aholiab, who are called upon to work on the tabernacle. And I mean, you think filled with the Spirit, they're not prophets or priests or leaders of men. They're craftsmen. They work in objects. And that kind of stuck in my craw, and I chewed on that for a long time. I'm like that. Like some little thing will just stick in my head and I can't shake it. And I thought about that and thought about that and thought about that. And then I realized that we have a second relevant first occurrence, which is the first time we ever meet God biblically. And the first thing we ever see God do is that he, needing nothing, creates something that is beautiful for its own sake. The very first image we get of God is as an artist. It's the first thing he ever does, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't need us. He doesn't need this universe. He doesn't need anything we provide, but it's beautiful and he loves it, so he created it. And we're made in the image of God, and I think that that's written into all of us on some level. I mean, you can look at all of human history and we've always made things. Like you can throw Maslow's hierarchy of needs out the window because it's not right. Because you can have people who are starving or in a concentration camp or living in a cave, and they will make art. They will create things just for the sake of creating. And the only explanation I have for that, and the only reason that we're different from animals in that way, is that it's got to be this splinter of God that's stuck in us. It's this way that we're following in his footsteps, is we're as compelled to create things as he was. And I've just been obsessed with that idea ever since, that creating things can be an act of worship. I did a lot of research and reading and spoke to a lot of people while I was at the artisan shop too, and worked on this idea a lot. And I think it's a really underrepresented aspect of the ministry, is that I don't think there's a lot of people who are creatively in tactile objects ministering these days.
Yeah.
We have creative ministries of song and literature and poetry, but there's very few people who are worshiping through physical objects. And that's been something I've kind of striven to do ever since. I don't think striven's a word, honestly. Strive.
I like it.
We'll take it.
How are you continuing to do that? I mean, like, if you caught that bug kind of back at Narrowgate and now you're operating as a fireman, like, where does that show up in your life now?
Well, the cool thing about the fire department is I work 24-hour shifts. They're pretty long, but I only work
24-hour shifts?
Yeah.
Yep. Those are pretty long.
Yeah. But I only work 9 of them a month. So 9 days a month, I'm working at the station, and the other days I'm free. So I still have a part-time job working at the shop I've been working at since I first moved back here. It's called
Great. Cool.
And we do high-end carpentry, millwork, house renovation stuff. But most of what I do is I design weird things. Clients will come to us and say, hey, we want a secret door bookcase, or, hey, like, we saw this thing. Can you engrave it in a piece of walnut, or can you make us a wall art installation? Or, I mean, we do whatever. And I get to kind of bend myself against that and beat my head against things until I figure them out and create things that at the end of the day are beautiful. And that's deeply gratifying to me. And I still think of it as an act of worship. I think that, again, if you look at the tabernacle, like, especially what we know post Jesus, is like, you don't need a temple to worship God or to connect with God, right? But it was still important to have this space of worship, to create an environment that facilitated that and to create beautiful things as an act of worship. And the chance to try and do that and to create beautiful spaces that nourish your soul is something I still love. I mean, we had a project a while back where somebody brought me all the parts of a stained glass window from a church in New England from the late 1700s. And said, hey, I bought these and they're just a bunch of pieces. Can you build a frame to put them all back together again so we can put it in our chapel?
Wow.
Yeah. And I just get to do stuff like that. So I still do that. I mean, I still make things, on the side just for fun. Like, it's a compulsion with me. There'll be nights that I'm laying in bed and I have to get up and go get a notepad and start scribbling out ideas for whatever it is that just flies in my head. But
well, that's cool, because it's not only is it continuing to pursue your desire and your kind of your need, your draw towards craftsmanship, but it is also like you using the gift of that analytical mind that God gave you. It's like you're not just pursuing your passions, you're also utilizing the mechanisms of how God made you, and that's pretty cool.
I got to say that, I mean, that's obviously anybody starts talking about forms of worship and I perk up a little bit. It's just who I am. It's how I'm wired. It's how I'm gifted. And I think it's just so refreshing to hear. It just seems like such a stable part of who you are, a stable part of your identity, to just say, in my creating beautiful things, I can worship God in it and through it. Because I'll tell you, I think I was, I had God speak this kind of vision over my life about what my gifts were for and kind of what who I was as a worship leader. And I think it was years later, maybe even around the same season that you were a student and I just happened to be on staff. I mean, goodness gracious, this was the community of faith that opened their arms up to me when I was in a season of wandering, a season of hurting and then, and then needing healing, that said, hey, come back here, come just be with us. We'll create a position for you, all this. And so many times I felt in that season like a student, like healing and learning and putting into practice these things that God had spoken over my life years before. But one of the things that really came alive to me in that season was just, how the conversations we would have that Bill would lead us through about, man, how when your heart is positioned correctly and worship is this response to, it's the I love you back, realizing that he has loved you first, that literally everything big, all the way down to something as small as like brushing your teeth can be worship unto God. I just like that one specifically, like Bill telling us like, yeah, you can worship God while you brush your teeth. And of course the room's dumbfounded, like, what's this maniac talking about? And he's like, yeah, you're brushing your teeth and you're going, yeah, thank you, God, that I have teeth. Thank you, God, that you have given us food to eat and that it's enjoyable to eat and that you've given me the ability to take care of my body and that I can use my body and my mouth to worship you. It's like, it just like unlocked, like everything. If our heart is in this genuine response to God's love for us, like everything can be worship unto him. And so, dude, I'm just kind of like reflecting what I'm hearing coming off of you so naturally that's just, man, God has just got that all over you,
That's one of the things I love about Narrowgate is it's just that environment. Like, because I was bouncing back a lot. I remember vividly the mornings that we would wake up and we would stumble half asleep into the living room in the lodge, and you would just sit there with a guitar and you would just let the Spirit lead you.
Yeah, I got a little nutty.
I have the most vivid memory in the world of you sitting there on the hearth with a guitar and Trevor Ashlock playing a drum he got somewhere and just winging it. And I'd never experienced that. I grew up in really legalistic, cessationist churches, like really spiritually dead. Lots of knowledge, lots of religiosity and theology, but no spiritual element whatsoever. It was an out-of-tune piano and a choir, and that was it. And you sang Onward Christian Soldiers every Sunday.
Having flashbacks.
That type of worship was something I'd never experienced. Like I'd spent my whole life looking at people who would raise their hands, and I thought they were loons, I thought they were nutcases. Because again, I was a very judgmental human being. Like my understanding of religion was that if you had enough right answers, you were better than everybody else. Got in. It was just about having the knowledge and doing the things. I mean, I was a Pharisee, like straight up. That exposure to that kind of worship was definitely one of the first real cracks in that armor I'd built, where I started to realize, like, wait a minute, this is like doing something inside of me. Like you were singing and it was resonating in me. Like I was a tuning fork. Like I had no, within the worldview I had, I couldn't explain that. Like it defied everything I thought I knew about the world to feel that way. Same thing, as I came to believe that Bill and Stacey loved me and came to love them back and love everyone else there. And I was like, this doesn't fit in anything I thought I knew about the world. Yeah. It created this cognitive dissonance, and I had to start tearing everything apart until I could find what was wrong. It's just like a broken machine or anything else. Like that's a lot of what I do these days is I fix broken things, the fire department or my other job. And like, that's what that was, is it's like, I had to go through everything I thought I knew about the world and figure out what was wrong. Because it's clearly there was this stuff that didn't fit. There had to be, it was all put together wrong. I mean, and those are all just like, there were so many different pieces of it. Like it's difficult to understand how I could change so much and learn so much in such a small amount of time, but there's a lifetime of experience and knowledge that I gained in that 8-month period,
One of the coolest things about Narrowgate is the way that we kind of pop the hood and look underneath, the things that you think that you've always known about God or about the Bible, or things that you've heard, or like things that you have heard so much that like you haven't even stopped to consider whether it needs a second look, and then like just just blow the roof off of it and get underneath all of the, the common language and the Christianese and the, all the Christian jargon that goes into it. Like even worship, like we were talking about worship, one of the most memorable lessons that I remember from my time as a student was Bill's, teaching on the difference between like cataphatic and apophatic, praise versus worship, the external outward aspect of praise, praising God for what he's done and what he, will do and all of his, actions and loving, kindness towards us and what he does for us. And then, but worship is an internal thing. It's recognizing not the God out here, but the God in here, in your heart. And it was in that sort of understanding that I realized, oh, well, worship is not just singing.
Oh yeah.
Worship happens in here. So it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'm admiring, I am thinking about, I'm captivated by just the character of God, like who he is. And in addition to all that he does, but that's the recognizing that God, the creator of the universe, entered his creation in the form of an infant, a baby that ultimately grew to be a man who gave his life. Like God died.
Yeah.
Like that's like, just stop there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Try to wrap your head around that one. And then on top of that, like that death paid a price for me that I could never pay. And all that's right in here. And so I think that worship is so much bigger than, than we think. And it is reserved for God and God alone.
Well, I got to say, as I was listening to you, it just made me think about how, just how big God is. And I know that seems like such a small little phrase, but when you think about, and this isn't to hype up specifically Narrowgate, it's just that Narrowgate intentionally offers this type of atmosphere where guys can live distraction free in community. And then by your own admission, you're saying like, I didn't need more information, I didn't need more knowledge, but God needed to work in my heart and make this truth real in the community. And yet you've probably got a guy next to you who needs more knowledge. Mm-hmm. And all of this is happening simultaneously within the community because the Spirit of God is moving over the whole and through the individual and is working wonders in people's hearts and in their minds, like completely unique experiences, like two guys sitting next to each other, whether it's engaging in Bible study or conversation or engaging in worship together through singing. It's like he's that big that he can literally meet every need in the room in very individual ways.
And has arranged and ordained for all of those needs to be met in that moment. Like full lifetimes have been, arranged for something to happen. Like that was one of the things at Narrowgate that popped out at me too, was like somebody told me, hey, you're here with the guys in your class and the guys in the class above you and below you. You guys are all here at the same time on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like you have something to learn from them.
Yep.
And they have something to learn from you. And each of you have something to learn about God through that interaction. And that is God is big, is huge, because to think about the logistics of all that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think men could logistically get that done,
No way. That'd be a train wreck.
That reminds me of, the last couple kind of graduate reunions that we've had. And you get in that setting and you get a bunch of graduates and they want Bill, they want to hear a Bill study. They want to hear him get into it. And the last couple times he's just had this piece about him to be like, there's like one thing I want to say to you guys. And I think he's nudged us towards being so eager to hear the voice of God and be looking for the one, like be looking for that one person that God might want to bless through you. Cause the truth is can we reach everybody? No, you can't. I mean, just realistically.
That's the reason for discipleship, because it multiplies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exponential, but having that, just to walk through life, just knowing that, man, God wants to do something in me and through me. And maybe it's just for that one person. I don't know, just hearing you talk about like, yeah, the ways that we're unaware of how we can change someone's life. And yet if we're into, man, if we're walking in the Spirit and we're hungry and eager to hear that, we're going to see the one.
Yeah.
And we may never see the outcome of how that blesses that person or the transformation that God uses with it. But like, we'll be a little more eager to find the one, you know?
Well, that's what Bill says, you know, his kind of one of his adages. He says, you know, sometimes he'll say it to the guys at graduation, and it's almost like starts off kind of like, what the heck, dude? But he'll say, none of you are going to change the world.
Yeah.
But you can change the world for somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like, yeah, I mean, everyone has influence in somebody's life. You know, and so therefore, I mean, you have leadership in somebody's life, and you can't just turn that influence on and off. Like it's on, whether it's good influence or bad influence, like that's on you. But like everyone has the capacity to influence somebody's life. I think that's really important to stay connected to God, so that influence is, you know, where it's supposed to be.
Exactly. So like that discretion to find the specific person, the right person, is so important. I mean, we see that modeled in Jesus, right? Like he didn't heal every person he came across. He didn't disciple every person he met. And that was a huge struggle for me, at least. I'm a people pleaser. So you get out of Narrowgate, I'm like, I'm doing everything. Like I'm at, you know, food banks feeding the homeless. I'm trying to help people move, trying to work on people's houses. I'm trying to get involved in the church. And I was trying to do everything and fix everything all at once. And it took a long time, and it took Bill and Boots and Phil Stoner all talking to me going like, hey, you can say no to things. Hey, you don't have to do everything. You just have to do the right thing sometimes. Like you got to just pick that moment.
Yeah.
Spirit enough to know when it's important to act and when you're allowed to rest. Like, again, yeah, we see that, I think, so clearly modeled in Jesus's ministry, where it's just like he was selective, not because anybody deserved it more than others, but just because he was led by the Spirit to know when was the time to act and when was the time to not.
Yeah. Well, that even happens at Narrowgate too. I mean, like that's why there's a team of staff, you know, because like some guys click better with certain staff members than others. And some staff members click better with some students than others. And it's just part of the nature of it, you know, like Jesus had his, you know, 12 and then his, 3 and then his 1. It's like there's gravity to investing the majority of yourself into a few. Mm-hmm. So that those few can then take it and invest in more, you know, like if you try to evenly distribute your energy and your time and your efforts into everyone, then, you know, everyone's going to come up with just a little sliver that's not going to be very effective at all. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Something I've been thinking about a lot is I have a son now, and I have to decide, hey, what am I going to tell my son about being a man? Like I've got all the things I was told as a child, and I've got all the things culture says and society says, and have been spending a lot of time trying to go to the Bible and say, what am I going to tell my kids about who they are? Like, what do you say? Because you're competing with what everybody else tells them they are, right?
Yeah.
And what I realized is that, probably not on purpose, but like most of what I had been taught growing up in the church about manhood or masculinity, or even just to be a follower of God, not even like gender specific, is such a narrow band of the ways that you can follow God. And it baffles me. I mean, we're all in church. How many sermons have you heard about David? Or, right? But how many sermons have you heard about Hezekiah? Mm-hmm. You know, like one of them, it says, was the greatest king Israel ever had, and it's not David.
Right.
Biblically, it says Hezekiah was the greatest king. But he didn't do the really cool, flashy stuff, right? He made peace. He caused reconciliation. He wasn't doing all that stuff. And that's not to take away from David. It's just to say that one of my passions, and I think one of the places that the sect of Western evangelicalism that I've spent my life in has dropped the ball, is we give people such a narrow slice of the scripture and of what it looks like to follow God. And it alienates people. It alienated me. I felt like a crazy person because I was like, I'm not that guy. Like I was not any of those things. And I was like, is there room in this for me? Do I have to become that person to be a Christian? You know?
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily as presented, like the nuance and the diversity and the weirdness of the Bible is just something that doesn't get talked about a lot. I mean, and you look at these, like there's giants of the faith that everybody knows, but then there's some that just Like, I love Nehemiah. He's this hero, and he's an administrator. That's all he does. Literally all Nehemiah does is he sees something that needs to get done, and he can't do it himself, but he organizes it.
Yeah.
Again, like Hezekiah is a peacemaker. Like, he doesn't win a war. He causes reconciliation in the wake of one. He reunifies by forgiving. That's a lot of that's just not presented.
Well, even the things that are presented, like David, the big flashy stories, like you get preachers getting up there talking about, like, David killed Goliath and you can slay the giants in your life too with the power of God. And it's like, that is not what that story's about, man.
Hey,
like
Jesus, Jesus is David, y'all.
That's right.
Cool
You're not David in that story. You're the coward Israelites that are, shaking in their boots in the crowd.
Let's not overlook that we probably just offended a few listeners who are not in line with that.
Oh,
with
no,
that
they'll be
theology,
fine.
but
They'll be fine.
I mean, what are you going to do anyway?
Yeah, they might be offended now that you drew attention to it.
Yeah, that I drew attention to it. Now they're offended.
Yeah, just comment on the page if Logan offended you.
What? This is the first time you've asked people for comments.
Well, that's just another one of my passions. Is the Bible's this baffling, weird book. It is full of the craziest stuff you've ever read. And I feel like a lot of people can go through their whole lives as a Christian and claim that they believe that book. And I'm not belittling their Christianity. I'm just saying, like, you can ask people something sometime, be like, do you know what you're actually saying you believe in? You believe in giants and ghosts and people that can legitimately talk to the dead. Like, mediums are a real thing in the Bible. It worked. She hollered at him on the phone and got him. Like, that's in the Bible. That's weird. Like, there's parts of the Bible that are just baffling, and it's so nuanced and rich, and it's got all these different literary styles, and there's novellas and poetry and a census. Like, I love numbers. I'm that kind of nerd where I think censuses are awesome. And I love that. That's so cool that it's got so much in there. But I feel like there's, 8 parts that everybody knows, and there's this whole huge ocean of meaning and knowledge and wisdom that gets overlooked. Because, and I get why, like, obviously I know, like, if you're running a large ministry, you have to be able to get to people who don't know this stuff. Like, you have to be able to have the beginner's class, but it is one of those things that I have to have my small group of friends that I can talk about this stuff with, because, like, you're not going to hear that. It's just such a bizarre book. And people, I think, just really fail to appreciate that sometimes. Not only that, but like how it got here, how changed it is, like how different what you're reading it from, maybe from the original language, like the depth and the complexity of it, and the fact that it's alive. And that's my favorite thing is I like to, crack open a Bible and be like, what don't I know about? Let's see what's in Amos. And then I love Amos. It's my favorite book.
Of course it is.
I'm like, oh, what's Amos about? Don't nobody ask me that. Why am I even talking about the fact I don't know it?
Be nice to poor. Cliff notes. Don't let greed cause you to take advantage of all the poor in your country and make it inhospitable.
Yeah, there we go.
Love people and make your country a place where people can survive. Don't get so greedy that you ignore basic humanity.
Yeah.
But again, it's just, there's so much there, and there's so many weird things. And it's been my experience unerringly that every time I've stumbled across something in the Bible I don't understand and it gets stuck in my head, it eventually turns out to be this huge, like, transformative knowledge for me. It turns out to be this thing that God's trying to teach me. And it can take years. I cracked open Jeremiah when I was in service at Narrowgate. Because as it turns out, depression doesn't just magically go away, no matter what's going on with you. So I was at the end of Narrowgate, and I was having a really bad time for a little bit. And I was not in a good place. And I cracked open the Bible to Jeremiah. And I think I've heard God speak maybe twice in my life, like an audible, like, and that was one of them. As I flipped it open to Jeremiah, which I'd never really given a lot of thought to. Like, I knew the stuff, everybody knows about it, but I hadn't paid attention to it. And I started to read Jeremiah 1, and like, there was another person in the room. I heard God say, "That's you." So I read Jeremiah, and then I spent like a year and a half really angry about it. I don't know if you've read Jeremiah, so obviously you have, but Jeremiah and Lamentations are bleak, bleak. Like, he lived his life without ever really a convert. And he did something wonderful and great, but like his day-to-day life was awful, like unrelentingly. He had no friends. He had nothing. He was just doing what had to be done and suffering. And obviously, like, parts of that resonated with me to say, like, okay, this guy's worshiping God through suffering, because I was suffering. I was depressed and miserable, and my brain was broken, and I couldn't get myself to function. I couldn't understand why I couldn't do the things other people could do, and why can't I just be normal? But it took years for that to really come to a place where I wasn't angry at God about it. You know, to say, like, how dare you? I don't want to be that guy.
I'm sitting here just kind of beaming, just going like, I've missed McKenzie Meredith.
Oh yeah.
Because again, this is like, add this to like 12 other scruffy dudes.
Yeah.
Throw it in the living room at the lodge, and like, this would go on
totally
for as long as we could. I mean, again, dude, I say that because, like, dude, I love the mind that God has given you. I love your genuine, very, very transparent take on like, on the entirety of Scripture, and how, there is some mind-boggling things in there, and yet you come at it with a curiosity and a hunger that is just seems like continually. I feel like I've said the word refreshed like all day, but I'm going to say it again. It's just
refreshed.
It feels refreshed and refreshing to hear, and it's weird to look back and be like, yeah, man, we used to do this all the time.
Yeah.
And I miss that.
Bill told me one time that he just got done teaching like this big, like 3-hour long lesson, probably like the theory of relativity study or time relativity.
Oh yeah.
And then McKenzie comes up after him, and he's like got these like follow-up questions, and like he's like asking questions, and then, you know, Bill's like trying to answer, and then he's like, oh, okay, cool. So what do you think about nuclear fusion or something, you know, like something like that? And
I feel like Bill's like, I'm cutting this off. We're going to bed.
I would get between him and the bedroom after our nighttime studies, and he'd be trying to slowly edge around me while I just peppered him with questions.
God bless you for it, man. Well, you know, unfortunately, we are going to get into the end of our time here. So we do, again, if we like to kind of end with this, because the truth is we've got graduates now, which is really who this podcast is for. It's to connect our community of graduates, you know, and spanning many years, from guys who are coming out, you know, young men at 18, 19 years old, all the way up to guys in their 40s with families. And so if you feel like that God's given you one word of encouragement specifically for this community of faith, you know, kind of the Narrowgate graduates, Narrowgate family, if there was one word of wisdom that you feel, and one encouragement that God's just, you know, proven in and through your life that you want to bless us with to wrap this thing up, what would that be?
Oh, without doubt, it would be that life is full of seasons. And if you cling too tightly to one, you're going to miss out on what the next one has to offer.
Dang, that's a good one.
I left Narrowgate, and all I wanted was to stay in that. And recognizing that there are times you get to pick up the things you love, and times you have to put them down and you have to do other things, and how to find God in those new environments, and knowing that like your walk with God is going to be in constant flux every day of your life. And if you get too nostalgic, and if you try to cling too tightly to where you are, you're going to miss beautiful, wonderful things, and you're not going to grow. Growth requires constant change. And you just have to acknowledge sometimes that you're going to go through seasons that you're not prepared for, or you don't expect, but it's on purpose. And there's still beauty to be found in that. And you can still connect with God and learn things about him and grow as a person.
As usual, beautifully said, sir. Come on. That'll preach.
McKenzie, it has been an awesome time talking with you.
It's been great talking to y'all. I miss you guys. I love y'all.
Yeah.
Good catching up with you, man. God bless you, dude.
Bless y'all. I love you guys. Y'all give everybody my love, okay?
Will do, man. Thank you.
Y'all take care.